Hi, my name is Samantha Marangell, and I'm from the Melbourne Center for the Study of Higher Education, and I'll be providing a presentation today on managing your research journey. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, as well as the elders of the lands on which you are all situated on today as well. Just a little bit of background about me before I go into the bulk of my presentation. As I mentioned, my name is Samantha, and I've been part of the Melbourne Center for the Study of Higher Education since 2017. I did my PhD in higher education, and my research now focuses primarily on the student experience of higher education, including student well-being and international student experiences as well. So just to give you a little bit of background on how I approached my PhD studies, I was able to meet with my supervisor in person, which was, I think, very beneficial for the way that we went about our continuing relationship together throughout my PhD journey. I had been an international student as a master's student, and so I wasn't new to Melbourne. It also meant that I, as I said, could meet with my supervisor in person because I was here. And could ask a lot of questions, could get a feeling for how well we would get along, for the type of communication that would suit us each best. And these were some of the questions that I asked my potential supervisor at our first meeting. I just wanted to get an idea for what they imagined our working relationship to look like, specifically about how they liked to communicate, how they preferred to communicate, how frequently they imagined that communication to happen. I just sort of wanted to establish a relationship where we were open and transparent and where communication was at the heart of how we worked together. There were some other aspects of my PhD experience that I think helped me in my journey. And one of them was just very lucky in that my two supervisors also worked very well together. They had worked together frequently and many times over the last few years as supervisors, as colleagues, as researchers. And so I really benefited from the complementary nature of their own relationship as well. The second point here is that I am one of the people who tends to sit more on the over-clarifying side. I know that for everybody it's a different balance for where they feel comfortable in being both polite and forthcoming and assertive and making sure that they have clarity. And I think I sit a little bit more on the I'd rather be a little over clear side. But I know that it sits differently for everyone, but it worked well for me. I also tried to have a bit of humor at sometimes when we misunderstood each other, perhaps because, if you can't tell yet by my accent, I'm American, and so there were sometimes instances of miscommunication where we were both using similar words but had different ideas about what those words meant, and so just making sure to keep a sense of humor throughout the process. But I also had a very strict schedule. I planned my 3 years all the way down to the ideal week. And I know that that doesn't work for everybody, but it was very helpful for me to have an idea for how the pieces might fit together. And of course, I didn't keep to exactly the same weekly plan throughout the 3.5 years as I had mapped out at the beginning, but having an idea for what needed to be done each week really helped me to know when I was on track, where there was leeway, how much flexibility there actually was. I know for some people it can end up making people feel more anxious, but for me it felt better to have an idea of what all the pieces were, and then as they readjusted, it was easier for me to know how much space and flexibility I had. So now let's talk about managing your research journey. And there are two pieces involved in this. One is the managing and the other is the journey aspect. So I'm talking primarily about graduate researcher journeys, but this would be suitable for early researchers in any regard as well. So let's talk about the managing aspect. There are a lot of different pieces of the research project and the research experience that require managing. Your timeline, the different pieces of the project, different goals, and then also managing your supervisor. Let's talk about each. So when I say managing your timeline, yes, you also have to manage your time on a daily basis and how you spend your time. But in this instance, when I talk about your timeline, I'm talking about the overall project timeline and making sure that you can finish on time and you get done what you need to get done by the deadline, for example. And really, as I mentioned earlier, it just comes down to knowing what all the pieces are. And even if you don't want to map it down to the week, still having an idea for how long each piece might take can really help you to stay on top of where there is a need for adjustment, about when you might be falling a little bit behind and when you're not. Something else to keep in mind is that even though there are going to be some pieces that might take longer than you expected, there might also be some pieces that take less time and that work a little bit more smoothly than you expected as well. But it just involves having checkpoints and staying in and staying aware and then anticipating when you need to make some adjustments. You might find that there are a lot of different pieces involved in your research project and that you need to manage that each of them are working well and moving forward the way that you would like. Something to do that can help make this more practical is to set reminders. If you have a lot of different pieces, making sure that you have an automatically set up system to keep you on track will be very helpful. It's also helpful if you know where the bottlenecks are, and by this I mean the areas where if you get stuck on one area, everything else is going to come to a halt. And so if you have, as in the previous slide, taken some time to see how long each piece might take, then you might be better prepared to anticipate when you're going to need to adjust or when you're going to make sure that you have a lot of flexibility or give more attention to one aspect than the other because you've thought about it in advance. It also is quite important to make sure that you take some time to reflect on who you are as a person and what works well for you. Are you the type that needs to visualize everything? If you have a lot of pieces, maybe you actually want to get a whiteboard and keep it on your wall or put post-its up so you can visually see where all the pieces are and how they fit together. Keep a lot of lists. I love lists, but maybe that doesn't work for you. Something else to keep in mind is the idea of delegating your own time and making sure that, if necessary, you can block out chunks of time to work specifically on one particular piece. I think by now most people have heard that multitasking is for the most part not as successful as we like to think it is, and so by focusing our attention purposefully for given amounts of time, that can help us to make sure each piece continues moving forward. It's also possible that you have a lot of different interests and goals and things that you'd like to experience or achieve during your research journey, so either during your studies or during your early career. And I apologize that my first comment here might seem a little cynical to say be realistic, and I don't mean to lower your expectations. I mean to be very realistic with yourself about what you see yourself doing and what's possible and what you want to achieve. Because if you've taken the time to really focus and think about what your priorities are, and again this comes to reflecting, then you can be quite selective in how you give your time and where you spend your time. But also you'll know where you have room to be flexible. If you know what you're able to do and you know what your limits are, then it'll be, first of all, easier for you to manage these additional activities and goals, but you'll also know exactly how much leeway you have. And then the last bit to manage, managing your supervisor. And my supervisors were quite explicit about asking me to manage them. And in this case, they meant that I would need to tell them what I needed, when I needed it from them, what type of information I wanted back, that I presented them with information for feedback rather than just coming to them looking for answers. Obviously, people have different relationships with their supervisors, different projects, different expectations. Perhaps there are also a lot of people involved in the project in which you are working. But it just means making sure that you understand that if, for example, you're a graduate researcher or a PhD student, that you know exactly what your responsibility is. For the doctoral students, for example, that ultimately the PhD or the thesis is your responsibility and it's your project. And so you need to take the initiative to communicate, to follow up, to send reminders, and that this is part of the learning how to manage the project process, in the sense of also learning how to manage people involved in that process. And this is just a comic that I think exemplifies that balance between taking responsibility but also working with supervisors or other colleagues on a project. It's from phdcomics.com. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at what they have to offer, I found it really valuable to understand that other people were in similar situations, have a little bit of humor about the situation. And so this is a comic strip in which the PhD candidate is coming to the supervisor and really providing the supervisor with very clear list of things that they need done to get approval for, to be approved and reviewed, because ultimately the student needs to graduate. So it has at the end here, wait, who's managing who here? And the student says, I'm managing to graduate. So just coming back to the idea that it's your project, it's your responsibility, that there is a balance between being polite and being forthright, but that ultimately they're not mutually exclusive. You can do both. You can be clear and still get done what you need to be done. And then second to the managing aspect of today's presentation is the journey aspect of managing your research journey. Really, ultimately, this just comes down to the fact that it is an up and down process, and yes, it happens to everyone. Personally speaking, I was still surprised, even though I knew that it would get difficult at one point. It was surprising for me exactly where and how it became difficult. I was under the impression, for some reason, that everyone tended to struggle with sitting down and focusing, and that part of the biggest challenge was just getting yourself to write and to put words on paper, figuratively speaking. But that was not the challenge for me. I had a different challenge, and it became much more about then managing my mindset. Again, coming back to the managing your journey aspect and really making sure that I kept my mind focused on what I needed to get done and focusing on how to move forward as opposed to getting caught up in the negative experiences and the frustrations. There is often a period where new researchers, doctoral students, will feel quite lost, and all I can say really is just keep moving. Again, to put it in line with the journey idea, that as long as you sort of keep moving baby steps, one step at a time, and you don't give up, that you can come to some gradual clarity at the end there. And I know that this might seem a bit cliche, but it really was necessary for me, and I think it also really is quite necessary for a lot of other early researchers, doctoral students, graduate researchers throughout the process as well. So perhaps think of this as managing your mindset and not just managing your journey. That said, some of the best advice I got when I was struggling. The first one was from my partner. When I complained about how difficult the thinking part was, he said to me, it's supposed to be hard, that's why you get a PhD for it. And it seemed so obvious when he said it, but I really did need that reminder because, as I mentioned, it was very difficult at times, and I was surprised, and I needed the continual reminder that it is supposed to be hard. The second piece of advice, again, sounds a bit cliche, but was a helpful reminder. It's a PhD, not a Nobel Prize. And I think that aligns again with the managing your mindset idea, to focus on realistically what's involved, what's possible, what you can say, what you can't say, what you can do, and then just being clear about what the steps were, what it is and what it isn't, and then just letting it be. Then the last one, that the PhD doesn't define you. And this was a piece of advice given actually to someone else, but I was nearby and I heard it and I found it very useful for me as well, that sometimes it can feel that your whole world is wrapped up in this one project, and that your intelligence, your worth, your value is based on how strong and well received this piece of work is. And I don't mean that we shouldn't be proud of it or put effort into it. I am very proud of the work that I've done, but I'm trying to focus on separating identity from that piece of work. So ultimately that the PhD and the PhD candidate are two different things, and trying to keep some separation and some focus as well. And then some last big picture tips. Number one thing, to set up a schedule. As I said, I know that it might not be for everybody to have a weekly schedule, but in this case, I just mean some type of understanding of when you're going to work and when you're not going to work. And then part two, to make sure that you purposefully allocate some off time, and then you let yourself enjoy it. I think also the benefit of having on time and off time is that it can also make you more productive during the on time if you know that it's limited. I have witnessed a lot of people who will sort of always be on and always be off, and they're sort of really never getting as much done as they want to do, but then they're also not enjoying the time when they're not really working, and it's really neither one nor the other, and they're often just very unsatisfied almost the whole time. So I think having this designation between when it's work time and when it's not work time can really do a lot of good. Point three, clarify, clarify, clarify. I really, as I've said 1,000 times, I think it's better to be awkward than confused. And ultimately, again, it's your responsibility and it's your project, and you just need to make sure that you have an understanding of what is expected of you as well. Point four, ask for help, advice, and suggestions from everybody. You know, you don't need to incorporate everything, but some of these ideas might stick, and you really never know what will work until you sort of hear it and give it a try. Point five, set realistic expectations for what you need to accomplish. And I don't just mean at the end of it, I mean also on a regular basis. If you have taken the time to make quite a detailed plan and timeline, then it also means that you'll be able to know when realistically you can pause and take a step back. So all of these points combined are really based on the idea that if you have a pretty good idea of what you're supposed to be doing and what kind of progress you need to make, it makes it much easier to do it, and then also to take the time off so that you can actually enjoy it, because you know that you are where you need to be and keeping on track. Ultimately, when we talk about managing your research journey, there are a lot of different pieces to this journey. There's the interpersonal aspect, there's, yes, the time commitment, the time management, but also the timeline, the different pieces, learning how to talk to different types of people, how to communicate your needs and balance your responsibilities with other people's needs as well, and also the project itself, right, and how to manage the pieces of the actual research. So there are a lot of different needs, a lot of different skill sets, and ultimately all I can say is that if you take a lot of time to pause and to reflect and to look at the big picture, it will go a long way in helping to ensure that you have managed each aspect of these in a way that you feel confident and satisfied, but also in a way that gets you to the end of the journey in a place that you feel proud of as well. So these are some of my top tips and reflections on managing your research journey for those who are new to the research journey. I'd be very happy to chat with you, answer some questions later if you'd like to meet with anybody sort of outside of your area, get a different perspective. But otherwise, I wish you the best of luck, and thank you very much.